David Granite, I'm not used to that. This is a composition that was inspired by my mother, which is always a dangerous place to go for a musician. It's a cross between being too intimate and not intimate enough. At the end of every section, there's a slight comment about my life with her, and I use the same technique that Debussy used in the preludes, where he would write a prelude, compose a prelude, and at the end of the prelude he would name it, like Sunken Cathedral. It would come generally at the end of the prelude. So I used that too. I really, really enjoyed that idea. There are strange remembrances that I have of my life with my family. I'm the second oldest of 9 children, and I was the only one that was musical. So my mother bought me a Steinway brand piano like this in a home full of 7 children. It was bizarre. I'd be playing the piano and we'd be fighting and screaming, and I'm playing piano. It's like Rome is burning. And my mother is extremely private, tough, withholding person, but she never really made me understand how much she enjoyed my music. And it was like something that really haunted me. And I would compose music, this piece, trying to understand my relationship to her and the family. She was born incredibly poor. I have pictures of my mother on a dirt road with no shoes, with a mule, in Pittsburgh. They were a steel family. And if anybody here knows anything about Pittsburgh, you work and you don't work. You work and you don't. There would have to be 200 bread lines at Christmas. Then everybody would work for 2 years and they get laid off. And my dad was a steel doctor. Part of his practice was in the steel mills. So my life in front of my mother has that kind of hard-edged, steel-working, American blue-collar worker life. She married a physician. My dad was an enormously successful eye surgeon. And my mother never went to college. She was a high school girl. She felt always, but she had tremendous talent. And she used to sing commercials on the radio at WWSW in Pittsburgh. She used to dance like she tied clean, do this, and shake them. She used to shake them like this. She told great dirty jokes. And, I mean, real dirty jokes. And she was a chorus girl. She had a mentality of a chorus. She spoke Lucky Strikes and say, "Edgar, I never used a 4-letter word to describe a man." And I giggled. I was like, and she would say other kinds of jokes that I mean, she just let it out. And she would sing Judy Garland songs and shake her little butt and run around the house. And she had kids, and then she'd go into an incredible depression. And then she'd come back out of it, and she'd dance and sing. She was a woman of enormous moves and incredible talent. But she felt less than because she never went to college. It was terrible. She suffered brutally behind my dad's position in the world and her position as his wife. And I was incredibly defensive about her. I would defend her to the death because of the way her life. But then again, our personal relationship was filled with enormous tension because I never really got her attention. So I wrote these pieces of music that reflect weird places in my life. You know, like when you grow up and you look back on your life, you have memory banks that are strange, that are so disconnected, that have nothing to do with continuity. One of the things I remember constantly in the spring, my mother's mother lived with us, is the azaleas would bloom. And my mother and grandmother used to celebrate the azaleas. They would say, "Oh, look at the orange azaleas." That's the stuff that impacted me, you know. And I grew up with those little memory banks, and that's a piece of music. This will start off very flowing. Eric will play it. It'll almost start to sing. and it'll almost begin to take off, and then it will descend at the very end to a woman who had never really allowed herself to celebrate herself because she felt education marked her. It's horrible, horrible. Because this I know privately. These are things she said to me behind closed doors, never in public. So at the end of this whole 6 pieces, you'll hear the memory bank of the very opening first page come back in sotto voce, just drift, you know. And it was my way of saying to Mom, it's okay. I used to say, Mom, it's okay. But she never would believe me. So I wrote these pieces, and I played it for her. And I told her, she had the classic musician mother's remark, which was, you know, Edgar, you really write great music, but I don't understand anything you do. And I said, Mom, it's okay. It's okay. I didn't go ask her to understand it. I just asked her to, well, this is what I did, Mom. It's like, this is it. This is what you trained me to do. You gave me the space and the piano. You took me to a great musician. My first piano teacher was a student of Cassadisseur at the Sorbonne, who studied with Ravel's and Ravel's best friend, Cassadisseur. So my whole life is in French music. When I was a child, he had been at the Sorbonne, came back to New York, Pittsburgh, and his brother ended up at Juilliard, Beverage Webster. He played all the Stravinsky ballets for piano. So Ferguson Webster, I spent my 9 years of my life in front of him, and he taught me that French aesthetic. And I still have the Ravel music with the annotations that he got were from Ravel. And I still have them. They'll go to my grave with all of it. It's just treasure. I treasure it. You know, that I understood it later on when I look back. So you'll hear chordal, jazz kind of things, but what you'll hear is an unsettledness. A woman who is tightly wound. She said to me more than once all her life, a woman does not show her feelings. She pulls her pants up, she tightens her belt, and moves on. She grew up in a depression, poverty. You whine, you complain, you die. There was a very binaural existence. You didn't stop. And they made fun of their poverty. She used to make fun of it and laugh about it. That's how they got past it. So what you'll hear is this every time she starts to reach for a cadence point, you move on. And that was the story of her life. She just danced through her life until she died. And that's a singer. She died a terrible death. She smoked to death. Dropped dead on the front of my dad. Had a heart attack and died on a carpet. 6 days after New Year's. And I miss her terribly. There are days when I just like to tell her, hey, Mom, give me $1. That was the way we communicated. Give me $1. She'd give me $1. She'd always go in her, she'd have $1. Here. Yeah. Great little, she got this tall. So that is the story of this piece. It's a little more emotional than I would normally let on. Sorry, Eric. But every composer has one of them. I'm being global, but from what I know, composition is a Rorschach test, and there's always one piece that you go to, listen to me say always, and that is personal. And every time you ask someone to play it or it gets played, you kind of reveal a little bit more about yourself. You know, normally I keep way at a distance. I'm not interested in you getting close to me that way, because you either enjoy it or you don't. I don't have to lobby about it. But this piece, and there's on the cover, you'll see my mother with her mother. And that was taken in Pittsburgh. Look how they dressed back then, the women. It's phenomenal. Look at this, the hat, the skirt, the dress. Isn't that great, the fashion? And these are just working class people, blue collar workers. That was my mother, gorgeous woman. She was called a black Welsh woman. She had she was half German and Welsh and English. She had coal black eyes and dark skin and black hair. And she, that was the picture with my grandmother. That was her mother. And I just am astounded at the way people dressed back then. She was just living her life, you know, going someplace. So anyway, that was my mother. And
how old was she when she died?
How old was she? She was nearly 80. My dad and mother both smoked to death. They both died of emphysema. They didn't care. So I really, thank you, Eric. But that's the way it ended, but that's not the way it began. Now, and I'll end with this. When I was 9 years old, my mother was Christmas presents, and she bought a toy xylophone, and she gave it to me, and I started to write music on it. And she did I'll never forget the classic remark. And she's a tough lady now with the Lucky Strike hanging out of her mouth. Oh, what do we have here? And that turned my life around. It wasn't, oh, I'm a musician. She said, what do we have here? It's just so, oh, by the way, he plays something. Take him, go put him someplace. You have to, it's just so my mother. It wasn't like, oh, like we're going to turn me into like the class, it was just, oh, you play the piano? Come here, go over there. And it was the way she was. And I shall never forget it. I still remember to this day, in fact, sitting at the dining room table, playing that was ruined my life. I said, look out, I own a car, but I'll never buy a house. I don't care. Anyway, and this young man has been with me now. I've discovered him through a student, Eric Hunter. And he's played the cello piece that I wrote when I was at Juilliard. And he played the piano for the cello. And he's a wonderful pianist. And he really plays my music. It is amazing to me that he plays the notes. I always feel so honored when a musician plays the notes. And it's just, and he's wonderful, wonderful. Very smooth, delicate technique, fluid. Actually, very French in a certain way. Not if I may say that, which I love that. Everything about my life as a composer is French oriented. It has informed everything about me. And that's why, and so I think two things today, we let Eric is enjoy the composition, thank you, but please, let's enjoy this wonderful young man. Okay?